A few years ago, back in my high school days, a peculiar and somewhat frustrating encounter unfolded during an English presentation. I was paired up with a classmate, a girl I didn't know too well. We decided to work on the project at my house, thinking it would be a good opportunity to get to know each other better. As we took breaks from our work, we began discussing various topics unrelated to the presentation. The conversation was going pretty well, and I was starting to think we might actually become friends. That's when she dropped a bombshell. She casually mentioned that she had initially assumed I wasn't a chill person because of my choice of friends. I was taken aback, not quite sure what she meant. So, I asked her to clarify her statement, and she went on to explain that she believed my friends were losers, and implied that I should find better people to hang out with. Ouch! That hit a nerve. To paint a picture, she was more aligned with the popular kids at school, although her true standing among them was a bit hazy. In contrast, I didn't fit neatly into any specific social group. I had friends from various circles, but they were all incredibly kind and supportive. They were there for me when it mattered most. Her comment stung, and suddenly, I didn't want her in my house anymore. I decided to cut our project work short and suggested we split the remaining tasks and work independently. My main goal at this point was simply to get her to leave. The project was significant, and it was a partnered assignment, so we'd be graded together on our presentation. I couldn't risk her affecting my grade. I did my best to tolerate her, but the situation only worsened as the deadline approached. She made minimal progress on her share of the work, leaving me to pick up the slack. I gradually realized she was exploiting our partnership solely to secure a good grade. I had essentially completed 95% of the project on my own, but I held off on sending her the finished presentation until the morning of the due date. Here comes the petty part. On the day of the presentation, our professor announced a new option. We could now choose whether we wanted to be marked individually or as a team, whereas previously, it had been mandatory to be graded together. Given that I had done most of the work and she wasn't well versed in the content, I decided to approach the professor before our presentation. I explained my situation, emphasizing the vast disparity in our contributions to the project, and requested to be marked separately. The professor, understanding my point of view, agreed. However, I didn't share this crucial information with my partner, leaving her in the dark about our grading arrangement. She assumed we'd be marked as a team. When it was time for our presentation, I divided the content equally between us, even assigning her parts that she couldn't explain confidently. As expected, she fumbled her way through the presentation. Later that day, the grades were revealed, and I was thrilled to see a 90% next to my name. She, on the other hand, received a grade in the 60s. I decided not to disclose my score to her, and unsurprisingly, she never approached me again. Living with a sweet but forgetful guy had its quirks. We'll call him Mike. Mike was genuinely one of the nicest and most gentle souls you could ever meet, always willing to lend a hand or share a friendly smile. He had a heart of gold, but he had one peculiar habit that drove his roommate, Jane, absolutely bonkers. Every morning like clockwork, Mike would get up early to shower before heading off to work. This part was perfectly normal. However, what came next was the crux of the problem. As he undressed and stepped into the shower, his worn boxers would unceremoniously end up on the bathroom floor, seemingly forgotten. In his rush, he never took a second glance to pick up the abandoned undergarments. Jane, sharing the apartment with Mike, was fed up with this ritual. The bathroom floor had become a makeshift laundry hamper, and she had had enough. She requested, implored, and practically begged Mike to change his ways. Each time, he'd sincerely apologize, promising to be more mindful, but the situation remained the same. The boxers continued to litter the bathroom floor, testing the limits of Jane's patience. One fateful day, her exasperation peaked, and a mischievous idea took root. It was time to teach Mike a lesson in a way he wouldn't forget. Jane, who usually did her best to keep the peace, decided to resort to a bit of harmless, albeit unconventional, retaliation. That morning, as she stumbled upon yet another pair of Mike's forsaken boxers, she decided it was time to turn the tables. Without hesitation, she grabbed the offending underwear and ventured into their shared bedroom. With all the care of an experienced prankster, she placed the wayward boxers smack in the middle of Mike's pillow, waiting to see how he'd react. The day passed like any other, with both roommates busy with their routines. It wasn't until bedtime that Mike discovered the surprise Jane had left for him. Horror and revulsion washed over his face as he encountered his own boxers on his pillow. He was thoroughly grossed out and baffled. "Ew, that's so gross. Why did you put them there?" he asked Jane, perplexed. With a wry smile, Jane delivered the final blow: boxers on the bathroom floor equals boxers on your pillow in the future. It was a lesson conveyed in a rather unconventional manner, but it was one that proved remarkably effective. As the days turned into weeks and months, Mike experienced a sudden transformation. Those once forgotten boxers never found their way to the bathroom floor again. It was as though the simple act of placing them on his pillow had been a revelation, a potent reminder that sometimes, actions spoke louder than words. Mike and Jane continued their journey as roommates, with a newfound understanding that life's little quirks could be smoothed out in the most unexpected ways. It was a lesson that both would carry with them, and it somehow strengthened the bond between the two friends in a way they could never have anticipated.
Years ago, my brother embarked on a new adventure when he moved into an apartment that had sat vacant for nearly 6 months. It bore the faint odor of cigars, which worked in his favor since it resulted in a reduced rent and a bundle of enticing concessions. The property managers offered waived pet deposits, free access to the building's gym and pool, and most crucially, complimentary internet. As the months passed, he took advantage of these perks. Though he didn't have pets and wasn't a fan of the gym, the lure of a free swim and the promise of internet was too good to pass up. He even managed to convince himself to adopt Roger, an adorably dim-witted spaniel. However, Roger's exuberant energy didn't quite align with apartment living, and when my brother's lease expired, he opted for a small house with a yard. In the lead-up to moving out, my brother went on a cleaning spree that would have made even the most diligent housekeeper proud. He was determined to receive his full deposit back, and no corner of the apartment was spared. He arranged for professional carpet cleaning, scrubbed appliances, filled every nail hole, and left no surface untouched. Despite his efforts, what he got wasn't a deposit return. Instead, nearly 2 months later, an invoice landed in his mailbox, and it was a whopper. 12 months of internet at $40 per month, $480, 12 months of gym dues at $25 per month, $300 that alone would have been outrageous, but then the next 5 pages of the invoice detailed a staggering 182 late charges at $15 each, amounting to an eye-popping $2,730. The ultimatum was clear: pay the balance, minus the deposit, within 30 days or face debt collectors and interest. My brother's response? A resounding no. He had dealt with deposit disputes before and wasn't about to back down. Off to small claims court he went. In the courtroom, the judge inquired if they were open to settling the dispute among themselves. My brother, eager to put it all behind him, agreed. On the other side, the representative from the property management company was equally eager to negotiate. "Bro, you owe me $1,000, but if we go back in there, I'll be asking for a lot more due to your late fees and bogus billing. What's your offer?" Manager: "The agent who signed the lease with you didn't have the authority to provide the concessions they did, which is a point I'm confident the judge will consider. However, I understand why you might feel wronged. I'm willing to forego the late fees and split the remaining amount in half. I've got a check for $610 ready, not a bad outcome for a morning's work, wouldn't you say?" My brother, chuckling at the gall of the proposition, tersely told the manager to take a hike and walked back into the courtroom. In the end, it wasn't a laughing matter. After a whirlwind 15 minutes, including a spectacle of invoices from Verizon being passed around, the judge ruled in favor of my brother to the tune of $3,096. But there was an intriguing twist. Remember how the free internet was the main perk? Those Verizon bills presented in court turned out to be invoices for 5 separate residential internet connections. My brother, realizing something shady was afoot, made a call to the telecommunications giant. He informed Verizon that the property management company had been illicitly reselling internet access by using straw accounts under the names of their employees for at least the past year. 2 days later, internet service to the building was unceremoniously cut off, and it remained disconnected for an entire month. The gossip circulating among his former neighbors was that the property management company had to pay an exorbitant sum of nearly $30,000 to restore the internet connection. In the end, justice was served with a side of sweet irony. A few years ago, after enduring the kind of workday that leaves you hovering precariously between the mental states of "this is fine" and "I'm not okay," things suddenly took a positive turn. The grueling hours, the late nights, and the relentless brain-frying labor had all paid off. I'd received a much-anticipated promotion. Eager to unwind and savor the moment, I decided to celebrate with a nice dinner out. My significant other, on the other hand, was initially less enthused about the prospect of dining out, but in the end, he decided to join me on this occasion. I quickly made a reservation at a nearby restaurant, and I was going to pick up the tab. We were led to our table in the cozy, dimly lit restaurant, and I couldn't help but notice that the couple seated at the adjacent table appeared equally engrossed in their evening. They seemed mature, poised, and well put together, giving off an air of sophistication that blended effortlessly with the ambience of the restaurant. Little did I know that I'd soon become an unwitting subject in their date-night discussion. As my so and I settled in, we allowed our mental guards to drop. At this point in our relationship, we'd transcended the mind your manners phase, opting for authenticity over formality. We could order our food without hesitation, fully embracing the relaxation that comes from being truly comfortable in each other's company. Our selections arrived, a medley of delightful flavors and textures. Amidst bites of delectable dishes and engaging conversation, we stumbled upon a dish that particularly tickled my palate, a minuscule skewer adorned with roughly 30 grams of succulent meat. It was an unexpected delight, and the realization struck me, I had to have more. When the server made her rounds, I decided to act on a whimsical craving and ordered an additional 2 servings of this exquisite skewer. Little did I know that this seemingly innocuous choice would attract the attention of our neighbors. The girl sitting at the neighboring table, who I initially thought was simply enjoying her evening, started whispering to her date. While the background hum of the restaurant's ambience concealed most of their hushed conversation, I couldn't help but catch the snippets that reached my ears. Mockingly, she reenacted my earlier request for extra skewers, and, with calculated precision, spoke loud enough for me to overhear her. It was evident that I was now the subject of their conversation. In the brief span of time we'd spent in such close proximity, she had formed a rather conclusive opinion about my character, the dynamics of my relationship, and my financial situation. Her inferences were straightforward, bordering on cliché. According to her assumptions, my boyfriend was footing the bill for our meal, and I, as one of those stereotypical girls, was merely a freeloader living off my partner's earnings. Let me clarify a few things for the record. My upbringing had been far from privileged. My dad had been disabled since my teenage years, and my mom had made the noble decision to quit everything to take care of him. We navigated through life with limited financial resources, which had helped shape my perspective on money and the value of hard work. My life experiences had granted me a unique perspective that defied stereotypes. The fact that this stranger, whom I'd never met or interacted with before, had so casually pigeonholed me and passed judgment based solely on her superficial observations was disheartening. My choice to indulge in a few extra skewers should have been a trivial matter, yet she had managed to spin an entire narrative around it. I couldn't help but feel a pang of hurt. It wasn't just that she had made these assumptions, it was the conviction with which she held them and the way she deliberately chose to mock my behavior and decisions. On top of that, she had gone to great lengths to ensure that I was privy to her opinions. I couldn't shake the feeling of being unfairly reduced to nothing more than her assumptions. Despite the annoyance, I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't feeling a tad petty at this point. I had worked diligently to attain the mental and emotional state that would allow me to unwind on a Friday evening. Now, all of it was suddenly underpinned by this stranger's misguided presumptions. As our dinner progressed, we decided it was time to conclude our meal and requested the check. When it arrived, I signed it without a second thought. However, the judgmental girl at the neighboring table couldn't resist taking note of my actions. Her insinuations had certainly caught my attention, but I decided to respond in a way that would emphasize the importance of thinking before passing judgment. That's when I launched my own act of pettiness. While settling our bill, I made sure the judgmental girl was aware of it. I caught her gaze, unapologetically glaring in her direction. The tables had turned, and for a brief moment, she found herself on the receiving end of someone else's scrutiny. As she and her date pondered their own bill, meticulously calculating how to split it, I continued to send pointed glares her way. I hoped that this small taste of her own medicine would make her realize the impact of baseless assumptions on someone's evening. Though her assumptions had marred my evening to some extent, I held no grudges. My intention was never to cause harm or discomfort. Instead, I wanted to highlight the importance of empathy and understanding, particularly when making snap judgments about strangers in the presence of a date. Perhaps, this small act of pettiness could serve as a reminder that we should think twice before forming conclusions about others. Ultimately, as I walked away from that restaurant, I hoped that my silent message would linger in the girl's mind, prompting her to reevaluate her tendency to pass judgment on those she barely knew.